So the other thing that we have to learn today is forms. And forms, right? You've seen forms before, right? You used to create inputs with the DOM, and then we created a form with state, right? We created a state, and we know with the state we have to add to the input two things. We have to add the value, right? For example, for the task, and we have to add an onChange that will take the task from the target value. You remember this? So this is usually the way. I mean, having a task state. Okay? So this is pretty much how we create and control input on React. Now, this doesn't scale well when you have to create a form that has probably more than one input. So for a single input, it's fine. But if you have to create a form that has more than one input, and it could be more, it could be 2, but it could be 10, or it could be 100, right? And then you can have inputs that have different structures. Like you can have a form where the data has lists, or the data has sections that the data that show depending on the data, right? And it also has to have validation. So then this state is really not maintainable, right? And for that, we're going to use another library, and this one is called React Hook Forms. Okay? React Hook Forms is another library. So first we learn about sustain, and remember, you only use sustain when you need to manage some state, when some logic is applied, right? If you have some logic that you need to control some and manage that state, you can use sustain for that. Now, for forms, this is one of the libraries out there that is actually pretty much the standard, right? When you are creating forms, you go to React Hook Forms, okay? And you can find the documentation about React Hook Forms online, but again, it's a library that you have to install in your project. Now, what I'm going to do is to show you how to use it, and then we can apply it to some project, because of course we don't have a project today to create with React Hook Forms. I just want to show an example of that, because you will use it in your final project, okay? And the other thing is that this is the library that most of the companies in the industry are using today, right? Because it's like it's the best, if not the best, it's one of the best libraries out there to create forms and complex forms. And we will see how to use it with several examples. Okay, so the first thing is to install it, of course. npm install --save and React Hook Forms. That's the first thing. You need to install this library because it's not part of React. So that's the first thing. And then React Hook Forms, according to the documentation, you can read the documentation. You can create it will provide you a custom hook that is basically use form, right? So this is what this library provides for us. It has more hooks, more custom hooks, but the main one is this, use form, okay? Now, use form has a parameter, so I call it form, has a parameter, and that parameter is basically several things. One is the default values is an object. So you have a form that is basically, let's say, name and last name and age, or, well, I don't know, email and password, right? You can have email is empty, password is empty, right? So those are the default values. Or you have a form that has, name and last name and, I don't know, age. You can have something like this, okay? If you don't put anything, it's fine as well, because you can also set it on the input. The other thing that you have is a resolver. Now, a resolver is essentially a function that validates the data, okay? And we can see that this resolver, we can see how can we create a resolver later. For now, we're not going to use a resolver, and that's it. That's all we need, right? Now we have a form. That variable form will allow us to create a form. Now, in every input that we have, we don't have to specify value on change, any of that. We can do ... form.register, and we specify what is the name of this field, right? We can say, okay, this is the name, and that's it. And then if we have one for the password or the last name, we can do ... form.register last. Okay. Now there are other properties here that we can pass. For example, for the form tag. Remember, every form has to have a form tag. Submit. We can do form dot. I think here is handle submit. And here we will have a button of type submit. Okay? So now this is essentially a form. So we are creating a form, but notice that we don't have to create a state for it, and we don't have to. We have ways to validate. Okay? So let me show how this works in a real life application. And I will first of all install the library. So npm install -- save React hook form. Okay. Now let's create a form. Oh, the contact form. Remember the contact form? Let's do that. Contact form JSX. Okay, so we have a form, contact form. So this will be my component. Now to create the hook for the form, I do use form. And default values, one of the properties. The other one is resolver. I will not use resolver yet. We'll find what resolver is later. And now let's do the form. So this form has a name, it has a name, an email, and a text, right? Like a message? Mm-hmm. And a button, yeah. So the first thing I'm going to add is the form tag. On submit. So handle submit, handle send. Okay, handle send will be a handler here. That will get the data from the form, and it will do something with that data. So for now, we'll just alert that data. Okay. So remember, all forms should go inside a form tag, right? Now, before I told you, well, you might have it, you might not. For the React hook form, this is the best way to do it. Why? Is because it will still work if you don't have JavaScript installed, right? If your browser doesn't have JavaScript, the form will still work, right? Even with all these things. So it's a good thing to use the form tag. Now my inputs will be the input for the name or for the email, and I can do this form.register, and I can say name or email. Oh, sorry. And only that. I don't need anything else. the one for the name, the form, the register name, and the other one was the text area for the message, right?
Yeah.
So the dot form dot register message, and that's my form. It's super quick, super fast, and it will add a lot of functionality. We can add a lot of functionality later. Now let's try it. Here, let's change this for the contact form. Okay. So, I don't have labels, of course. I mean, Yahoo Forms takes care of the data, but doesn't take care of the UI. Okay. So let's make it nicer. So label. This is the email. This is the name. And this is the message. Oh, a little bit better. Okay. And so now I can write the email. Oh, I forgot something super important. The submit. And this should be type submit. There you go. So, actually, instead of doing that, let's console log. So we can see it in the console, what's the data on that form. So you see in the console, that's the data, right? Email, message, name. So you see, to capture data is super fast because I don't have to have a state for every input and then connect the state to the input and do all that, right? Now, for even, let's try different type of data. Let's try, for example, the age. Or maybe say, well, let's add age. I'm just adding stuff here now. I just want a numeric value, right? Now, this register have a second parameter, optional second parameter, all options. And these options, you see that you have a bunch of options. And one of these is set value as, or actually value as number. You can say true. So this is a numeric value. That means that this input will store the value as a number. So now in the age, I can say, well, 46, and now the data will have age 46. But you see that the age is passed as 46 already. I don't have to parse it as 46, as a string, right? So that's another benefit of this hook. So it provides all that functionality for you out of the box. Now, the most important functionality from this component, from this hook, is that you can use, so of course, it's very easy to create data. Now, the other thing is that you can watch the values automatically as they are changing, right? So you can say, well, give me all the values using a watch. So you can do watch. That means that every time you modify the values, that values component, that values property will change, right? And I can do all sorts of modifications in my form based on that. Let's say I have like a checkbox or a radio button, and I want to show certain areas or disable or enable certain areas based on those values. I can do that using watch. So I can watch the whole form, or I can watch even parts, like I can watch the age. So every time the age property changes, I will have that property. Every time it changes, I have the property and I can do something with that property, right? Now, this is nice and all, but the main thing that we want to use here is a resolver, okay? So a resolver, remember, a form is basically a way for you to capture data, but you want to have the cleanest data possible when the user is entering the data. So you don't want the user to be entering the wrong data and then sending that to the backend, because then the backend will have to do some more work. I mean, the backend always has to do a lot of work, but you want to provide a very good experience for the user, right? So you want to be sure that the data that they are entering is at least a little bit correct, okay? So for that, you need to validate your data in the form before the user submits that data or sends that data. And for that, use form, or the React Hook form library uses something called a resolver. Now, a resolver is just a function, and for now we are going to comment because we need to create something that we call a schema. A schema is like the structure or of our form, of our data, right? And for that, we're going to use another library, and this library is called sod. So sod is a library. Notice that these two are used together, but they have different purposes. React Hook form is to create forms. Sod is a library to validate data, right? It's to create a schema, and you can parse data using that schema. But when you combine them two, then you can have a form that validates the data internally, okay? So let's install sod as well. And for that, I will do npm install --save sod. Okay? And run there. Now, with sod installed, I can create my contact form schema. And a contact form schema, notice that I'm using a capital letter, is basically a sub object. You can find the sub documentation online. But I can specify for every property in my form, I can specify what is the name of the property and what is the type of the property. Like, for example, email, I can say, okay, this is a sod string. Okay? And I can specify the minimum is 1. And if you don't pass at least one character here, I would say the message email is required. The same for the name. So name is a string, minimum 1, name is required. The message is just a string. I don't need to validate that. But maybe I want to validate that the max is 100 characters. Okay. What was the last one? Age. So age will be a number. And I want to validate that the minimum age should be 18. Only adults can submit complaints. Okay, so this is my schema. Now, if you check the sub documentation, you will find there all sorts of types of data. You have strings, you have booleans, you have numbers, you have arrays. You can pretty much describe how your form you want to validate that data, and that's even possible. And you can even make refinements in terms of in terms of, for example, the email, I'm just requiring one character, but you can actually say, okay, this should be a valid email, right? And actually, I think there is an I don't think they have email. Let me see the SOD documentation. SOD. Oh, nice, email. So it's a string. It's a subtype of email. So of string. So I can do email. Okay. So if it's not an email, it will also complain, and it has to be at least one character. Now with the schema, with the schema, I can come here to the form and use a resolver. Now the resolver that we need to use for that SOD, I need to Google it because I don't remember. In Yahoo form. Okay, it's the sub resolver. Now, I'm not sure that I need to install this. Okay, let's see if we have it. So, sub resolver. And I pass the schema, contact form schema. There you go. So now my form will also have that validation. So that means that I cannot submit it unless that validation is completed. Oh, of course, I need to install. I think it's this, the thing that I need to install. So npm install -- save. Okay. Let's see it now. Okay. Now, if I send it, you notice that it's not printing anything in the console because, and actually the cursor is showing on the first input that is incorrect. Now, I'm not showing anything that shows that that input is incorrect, right? Now, let's do a little change here, and let's make these inputs. What is the bootstrap component for that? Is input, right? Oh, input group, no, is...
You gotta do the form control first, I think.
What is the React bootstrap? It's not input? Okay, now we need the React bootstrap documentation.
It's
That's okay, I mean, this is pretty...
Input group.
Input group?
And form dot control.
Okay, let's see it. So, modal forms. What is forms here?
It's on form control.
Oh, forms. Form text. Well, okay, so we have form group for now. Well, it's a lot of work. I guess we need to use this. It's too much. Okay, let's just put one for one because it's that too much. Okay, so input form from React Bootstrap. Okay. And we're going to do so we want to keep this, and we're going to delete the rest. Okay. And instead of type email, placeholder, here we are. Okay, let's see my form now. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, let me go back because I don't know how to use this input, and I might be messing with my. So what I'm going to do is just to style this, right? So what I'm saying is styling is that, for example, I know this, how to show errors, right? So there is another property that we can use from the form, and that property is form.formState errors. And errors is an object where every property on the form, if there is a property with that name, there's an object for that. So if I can say if errors.name, that means that there is an error for that name, right? And I can actually print something there that says the error message, and that would be form.formState errors name like this. Now I can make this look, let's style this to be red, so at least we can see the error in red. Of course, red is not a property. Red. Message. Sorry, I haven't used this in a while. So you see, name is required because I need, this is the email, right? Oh, right. Okay, so this is one for name, and this is the one for email. And I can add the one for age. And I can add one for the text area, for the message. Okay, cool. Oh, I'm receiving a number. So I don't have an email. Let's put something here that doesn't resemble an email. Invalid email. You see? As soon as that's correct, it will remove the validation. I don't have to touch that. It's just automatically done for me. Name, Ernesto. Age, 16. You see the error?
Yeah.
Because that was my validation. It's like only legal adults can submit the contact info. Because I have a schema that says minimum is 18, and then the message will be this, right? If I put 18, it's fine. But if I put 17, it will complain. And again, nothing will submit unless there is an error in the form. As soon as I fix all the errors and I send, it's submitting the data, right? So React Hook form only takes care about connecting all the inputs, performing the validation, right? Any form that you want to create, you can create with this. It's a lot easier. And then you can connect that handler to get the data. And you see that the data is well formed. It's just an object with all your properties from the schema. So if the schema, it will get whatever is on the schema. You can make whatever type of validation in the schema, and that will be correct. For example, the name is Ernesto, right? But what if I don't want Ernestos to be submitting their info? So I can use a function called super refine, and that function will give me, a way to get the whole values, right? I can say if values of the name is Ernesto, add an issue, and I think the way to add this is code. I don't know what this is here, and then the path is in name, and the message is no Ernestos. Right, I think the issue, the code should be, let me see if I can find that. Wait, that's a schema, right? So that's in SOT. Super refine. Okay, like this. So this super refine function is checking when all the data is validated. So once I have all the data, before even submitting, I'm making another refinement, right? And in this refinement, I'm checking that the value for name is Ernesto. If it's Ernesto, I'm adding an error in that particular field. This means in that field, in the name field, right? So check this out now. I have Ernesto here, and when I send it says no Ernesto's allowed. So I'm refining up to that level. Okay? That's possible with Yahoo Form and SOT. So those two in combination, you can implement that. Remember, Yahoo Form takes care of the connected the inputs and performing a validation and then handling the submit. And SOT is handling the validation. Okay? Now, one nice thing about this is that it really works well when you have initial data, right? So if you are making a form that is actually modifying existing data, you can pass the existing data right here. Oh, not Ernesto, but you can put John Doe, right? And then the email will be john@doe.com, and the age will be 34, and the message will be hi team, right? So this is my initial data, and that means that my form will already start with that data. Okay, so it's good for edits as well. So you can work as a new data form or a form that you are basically modifying existing data. Make sense? That's the other thing. And I think the last thing is about form. I forgot. Oh, that's all. I think we are good on time. So I will upload this. Of course, we don't have a project for this. I will upload the video because the thing is that these two libraries you will need to use in your final project. Okay, let me stop this here.